Hello everybody and welcome to more Bandit Survivor, but just with a little bit less effort. And today we're going to be talking about both Survivor UK episode 5 and 6 of the reboot Series 1 Survivor UK. Unfortunately, this is pretty much how we're going to have to handle it for the rest of the foreseeable future. For anyone that doesn't know, I work on Saturdays. I do 2 to 10, and very fortunately throughout the first week I was off on holidays, and then week number 2 they actually swapped my shifts, so I had a morning to afternoon shift and was able to watch Survivor UK on my TV screen and be able to get out my review nice and early. But now that work has started up once again and I'm just not able to get the reviews out on time, like literally hours after the TV airing, I'm going to have to combine them both into these Sunday uploads. But we are going to be talking about both the episodes back to back, but I do want to say it's good to finally have some solid content from Survivor UK, where obviously there's a bit of concern last week about the slow pace of the episodes. Some of the editing was confusing. I mean, the editing in this week was confusing as well, but at least provided us with some good vote outs, an actual blindside in Survivor UK. I think that's the first time we've ever seen a blindside in the 5th Tribal Council, the Calaton Tribal Council. But let's get into it. So we obviously get our content from Leilani coming to the Lenina tribe after being voted out from the Calaton group, and we do get some funny interactions, such as the people on Lenina really confused as to why there's another person in the bed. We have Lee's reaction of, wait, actually that happened, and then just him swearing. We even have Pegleg saying that he had to do a head count in the morning just because he was thinking that it was a dream. But then we also do get talk about how Leilani is initially received very warmly into the tribe. She's laughing with Christopher and Ashley and saying that they want to work with her, which is very good content. Ashley gets her pre-season content talking about being a successful brand strategist. It's good content overall, and I really like that part about her tying in her real life job into Survivor. Again, this is basically a confessional hack for how to get screen time on Survivor US, and in Survivor UK it also works, as her confessional about making Survivor her quote-unquote successful brand does end up on air. But we also get Leilani initially choosing to lie by throwing Shy under the bus, and I had this really funny interaction on the sit-out bench with Joe and Matt, where I said that I would bet them £5 that the first thing that comes out of Leilani's mouth is throwing Shy under the bus, which actually ends up to come into fruition in a way that isn't even real, because she is trying to overinflate how much the Calaton tribe was against her. She appears disgruntled, and then we also have Chris being set up wanting to work with Leilani, but it's identified by Pegleg. So a little bit of negativity towards Chris, and a little bit more content from Pegleg talking about Leilani being a buffer zone. Essentially, she came into the tribe, but she's at the bottom, and if they do need someone to vote off, well, she's the easy option. Then we get to Calaton, and we get talks from Rachel and Shy about sending Leilani to the other camp. We have Jess talking about looking for the idol, and also she thinks that Shy has the idol, which, considering that Shy is a super fan and is someone that was obviously sketching out people, isn't, I guess, the worst assertion to make, because it could be a very legitimate concern that he does have the idol. We have Jess outlining that she's tight with Tanuki, Nathan, Matthew and Rachel, seemingly setting up this core 5, and then she also calls what comes into the challenge, which is chocolate and blankets, and I am surprised that both chocolate and blankets feature in the upcoming reward. But then we also get some positive content about Nathan and Lawrence being hyped up for the challenge before going to the site. And then for the challenge we have the classic Sumo at Sea course, which is good to see return. It is a fun challenge. We usually do get some fun moments, like an Australian Survivor All-Stars, at a moment of, like, we get like Abby twerking on Phoebe and stuff, and then San Juan del Sur we had some fun moments, so it is a good challenge to include, although it is weird seeing them swimming to the water podium, considering that other Survivor seasons, International and Survivor US, just have them riding in on a boat, and they don't even try to hide it really nowadays. But we do have Joe going through the reward, talking about how there's comfort, the likes of blankets and pillows, there's chairs in the reward as well, and he does say that he also got to add in milk and marshmallows, which I'm not sure is him just trying to over-explain the reward and try and add in his involvement, or if the producers actually let Joel add in marshmallows and milk as an extra bonus to the reward. I kind of like that if it actually did come into fruition, where Joel was able to have a hand in the rewards and add on little bits. That's kind of cool. But then we have the courses, which involve the likes of Doug beating Nathan, Christopher saying I love you so much, again adding into their kind of bromance on the season. We have this very odd editing compared to other episodes, with the text over the contestants as they're waiting to match up against one another. Again, I've talked about this previously last week, and I will continue to say it this week with another notable example, but it just feels like the producers, they just have a new editor every single episode. Like, all right, Ross, you come in for episode 2. Yep, that was good work. Yep, okay, now you're right. Tony, you come in. Yep, good episode, Tony. Right. Episode 4, Samantha, you come in, where we're just getting all these different editing styles, different pacing, and it's just a bit confusing to be able to consistently watch just when you have all these different editing styles that are at play. We have Tanuke and Leilani sharing the love, as it's basically them setting up their friendship for later on in episode 6 when they do eventually end up on the same tribe. And it is good seeing that Leilani doesn't have resentment against her Calaton tribe, that she does have to a certain degree some game awareness that these are people that she does need to try and build trust up with. Once again, Lee goes up against Shy, where they're set up as rivals once more, Lee winning that bout, so they're now 2-1 against Shy. And we also have a weird situation where the tribes are tied 3-3, and we've Chris and Rachel going again, which is all considering I don't believe Ren and Lawrence, I think those were the two that didn't go on each other's tribes. It is kind of weird that those two didn't get to go against each other, but then we obviously get the very notable scene of Rachel trying to go in for a low push, and they end up sliding their paddles against one another, and she just headbutts Christopher's tooth. Christopher thought he lost a tooth. Rachel's obviously bleeding from the head. It's a very jarring moment. And yet they have to swim back to shore with the medical team. Like, I can sort of understand why they don't want a boat for the Sumo at Sea Challenge, especially since it doesn't seem to be that far out, and they are quite lenient on the cast. They let them have a slow swim to the podiums. But if someone's bleeding from the head, and if another person's thinking that they've lost teeth, surely you don't want them swimming in the water. You can bring out some boat or like a dinghy or something, surely. But eventually both tribes actually leave with nothing, because there wasn't a winner. So in the Calaton tribe, we have a Rachel pre-season confessional, and I do feel really bad for her. I mean, you can tell she's a real inspiration, a fantastic mother in the real world, and it is very sad hearing what happened to her family and her husband, so my heart goes out to her. And overall, you know, you can just tell that Rachel is an incredible human being. But then we do get Joel coming in with the comfort treats, and it is good to see that from production, that even though it was tied, they have the understanding that the contestants are struggling on the show. It is Survivor, and they do end up giving the rewards to the Calaton tribe, as we see now, and then later to Nina, which I'm sure they would have done if it was the likes of Australian Survivor and Survivor South Africa. If this was Survivor US, they definitely wouldn't have done this. I mean, they probably would have ripped the teeth out of Christopher's mouth just to make him pay for being on the season. But then we have Lenina, and we have Leilani saying now how she wants to go back on what she said to Lelina. She wants to play a similar game to her real world, where she's displaying integrity and honesty, which I don't mind. The thing is that obviously it's kind of talking about her personal life, which is good, and I wouldn't have been against it if it was her main strategy. Obviously, I feel like in Survivor, saying yes to everything is the best strategy, so she should have been smiling at Calaton, she should have been smiling at Lenina, and giving up information to both sides just to try and get in their good books. But the thing is even if she doesn't want to play that game, okay, you know, you can be honest to the Lena tribe. The problem is this is following her lying. So she basically lies to the others and said that the Calaton tribe actually knew they were voting her out, rather than this argument and them taking her out, only to then end up saved by a twist. And this does not lead well for her, where this is probably one of the biggest crashes we've seen for a contestant, in my opinion, of watching Survivor for so many years, where it's kind of surreal just seeing all these people in their confessional room, one after another, bashing on Leilani after making this decision. I mean, we have Ren talking about how she's talking crap. We have Pegleg saying he has no trust with her. Ashley saying she can't be trusted. Christopher says that she's going to play them and that she's not with them, which is all really negative. And then obviously we have Joel visiting the tribe again, giving them the seats and such. So that's good to see them being able to embrace the comfort of the reward. So in Calaton, we have Jess again talking about the shelter being awful as it rains. Jess in this shelter, something's going on here. But we also have Shai talking about how everyone is grumpy, saying the social games might not be the best because of the elements. And then we get back to Lenina, which is basically just more Lee motivational content. And I do like Joel's line as well about how it's like the scariest motivational talk as he's wielding a machete and slamming it against a tree. But then we get to to the immunity challenge for episode 5, which is this relay course with a club endgame, like we see in Australian Survivor, notably 2017, where you have to smash these tiles. We have lots of Rachel talking leading up to the course, and even Joel, as he's trying to say, okay, survivors, are you ready? She's still talking about the strategy to her tribe, which is kind of odd that in this challenge, it's the one where, at least edit-wise, Rachel is really trying to take command and organise everyone, where, again, it's just a relay course. You have to complete one section, then do the next one. There's very few sections where it's kind of quote-unquote hero sections, where you only need a certain amount of people. That I can understand the strategizing for, but this one, it's very understandable what you need to do going into it. So again, I don't really know why she was talking so much to her tribe, but obviously that plays later into the episode. So we've got a lot of focus on Jess feeling the balance beam, as well as this almost like sort of Indian editing from kind of TV shows or movies, where it's just this super bright, hyper intensive editing as Lawrence crashes down. I was almost expecting the GTA wasted text to come up on screen, since they cut to grey, had this white flash, and had him slamming down on the ground, which was certainly something. Again, the editing is a bit bizarre. I do feel like they need to make it a bit more consistent for season 2 and so on. But we also have Lee, who does super well in the hammer throw challenge. Joel calls him Thor, and in a kind of a blowout, Lenina ends up winning the challenge. So we get to Calaton that yet again had to go to tribal council for yet another time. We have people like Matthew that are really down on it, saying that it's really getting down to it. They're having to cut into the bone of their tribe, and that he really likes the people. We have a confessional from Nathan advocating for saving Shy. Again in the confessional, saying about how they need the challenge strength. Jess is talking about splitting the idol between Lawrence and Shy to be able to ensure that one of them are going, which is really odd, because I always thought that Jess and Lawrence had a good relationship and that they had a good bond, but clearly I was mistaken. But it is good strategy from Jess, where obviously we were missing that sort of strategy from her, and while it doesn't come into fruition, as again she gets blindsided this episode, it is good seeing her playing the game and going from beyond just the social game to actually trying to incorporate strategy into her game. But then on the other side of the fence, we do see Lawrence in the well talking about why he wants to keep Shy, and poses the question to Tanuki and Matthew about who he wants to keep. And I do like the strategy from Lawrence, essentially flipping it on its head, going from this very antagonistic, negative stance of the game of, okay, let's get this person out, to essentially saying, I want to keep these 5, and the vote basically comes down to Rachel or Jess, the people that weren't in Lawrence's 5, versus the Jess plan to outplay the idol, which is Shy and Lawrence. And it was a bit of a toss-up, to be fair. I mean, I always thought that it was either going to be Rachel or Jess, but I did like that there were options out there, and they all seemed valuable. They all seemed like we understood why each person would be going out. Again, Shy would be going out for an idol, because they had been set up in the edit as being someone that isn't super social. Rachel was kind of this leader figure. And then we have Jess, who's making the challenges. So it feels like a lot better of a rendition to what they tried to do in episode 1, where, again, we just did not really know why Richard went home. But at the tribal council, we have Nathan saying there's a few names going around, plus Matthew clearly saying that there's names going around, which makes Jess distressed. And I also like... You'll notice this if you're really paying attention to the episodes. They've actually got thicker paper now, where in the first and second tribal council you could actually read the votes and the names for the person on the other end of the parchment, because it was going through it. But finally we get our first blindside, where in a 5-2 vote Rachel is eliminated. The only thing is that we don't really get a super coherent reason for why Rachel was being eliminated, especially when there was talk about eliminating Jess because of challenge weakness. I don't know, there just didn't seem to be that super consistent reason, but anyway. Let's get into episode 6, where already for the promo for episode 6, we get talk about Ren and Doug's idol, which really lets you know that, hey, this is coming back and it's going to be a big set piece. So Calaton, we have Jess having this essential quote-unquote waking up moment, as obviously she was left on the ice after the rounds, the only person not to vote alongside Rachel, and she instead votes for Lawrence, and she tries to start her workout with Nathan socially. And it's really good content from Jess, where you can clearly see that after this conversation she has managed to integrate herself into the core contingent despite being on the bottom after the last tribal council, and essentially it's this group of 5 that Jess talked about in the previous episode, where it's her, Nathan, Tanuki, and Matthew, just minus Rachel, obviously, which does seem to be reciprocated by the other 3 in that group, and it seems to be, if they did go to another tribal council, that 4 would hold up strong. But on Lanina, we are already going to talk about Ren playing harder than they thought they would need to, which is a little bit worrying. We have Leilani and Christopher chat about Lawrence's lie, and the idol that Lawrence talks about in his situation that he brought back to the Calaton tribe actually seems to make Ren's dilemma worse, where Christopher thinks that Ren has an idol because of Lawrence's lie that he told to the rest of the tribe. And obviously it's only Tanuki that knows about the idol clue, not it being an idol. So now they're thinking that Ren has an actual tangible hidden immunity idol. But Leilani also identifies that the information will likely spill like wildfire, and she's not wrong, as we see that Christopher goes over to Doug and Lee to tell them about this information of Ren having an idol, which is really humorous, about Doug saying, "What should I do?" when talking to Christopher, and him trying to coach Doug on how he's supposed to approach the situation, when it's actually Doug that knows the information already and has the idol in his bag. But then we have the talk about sending the wisest, the strongest, and the most trustworthy person to this dilemma, where Lee very clearly wants to go, but the rest of the camp isn't really feeling it. And I do like how near the later sections of Lee saying, well, you know, I can go if you want me to, we have Hannah even saying in subtitles we should send a female, which is kind of this funny moment of the editors again, kind of making a bit more of a lighthearted joke against the ickiness of Lee's content in week 2. And then we also have Lee's confessional talking about how he's just going to be at camp now, twiddling his thumbs. I do like that's a funny moment. We also have Matthew and Tanuki planning to send 3 of their core group, and Noctel, Lawrence, plus Shy. And I do like that Tanuki, well, I mean, it's very clear that Tanuki came up with this plan, how she's trying to game it to her advantage to be able to firstly tell the information to our core group and then integrate everyone else so that they can have a good strategy going forward. And this continues with content from Tanuki and Nathan strategizing about how they do want to send Shy, but not because he's part of the main group, it's just so that he's not suspicious of their main group, so that they can do the dilemma together. So then we have this meeting where it is weird seeing Joel super serious, talking about, right here, right now, you have 5 minutes. And even though I didn't talk about this on the second channel, I did talk about it in my appearance in the Sit Out Bench podcast, about how I was expecting a swap at the final 14, and I think that it would be very healthy for the show to have a swap at the final 14. It wasn't a swap like I was expecting. Again, I'm used to traditional swaps where everyone puts their hand into the bag and then fate basically decides where they go to. This time there was a group of 3 and Joel let them pick 2 people to swap to the other tribe, while one person got to go back to their other tribe, essentially as an ambassador or a guide for the 2 new people that will be going to Lanina or Calaton 2.0 and show them around. And it is interesting. I do wish that they just swap the 3 instead of having this moral dilemma of what person to keep behind, but you know, it is nice seeing a swap, and as we see, it actually changes the game trajectory from this episode, and more than likely from here on out. We have Pegleg talking about wanting to take Shy down because he's a strong player, which I think is good game sense from Pegleg. We have an interesting talk about Matthew and Tanuki both wanting to swap, and they do end up swapping, which is kind of interesting considering if one of them decided to stay behind, they would have had 3 out of 6 of the numbers guaranteed, with Shy as a person that was part of Calaton 1.0 to be able to pull in as well, or they could have taken out Shy and be able to have 3 out of 5 of the numbers. It is odd that both Matthew and Tanuki decided to swap, and we even get content from Jess later on surprised that both of them decided to put up their hand and leave for the other tribe. But we also have Doug saying about how he wanted to swap tribes to stay away from the heat, and the idol, and Ren that was popping up as conversation topics on the Lanina tribe. And it is good that we're getting content from Doug explaining why he's swapping from one tribe to the other. It is very reminiscent to Henry from Australian Survivor 2017, where him and Jackie found the idol together. He then kept the idol for himself, and then once again, ironically, another 2-person swap, came, he put up his hand with Ben, abandoning Jackie, who then got voted out on the other tribe because she lost her closest ally. So that is pretty funny, considering that it's pretty much what happens to Ren in this episode, with Doug abandoning them and keeping the idol for themselves, which I always expected that Doug would be a bit more willing to share the idol, considering his content about how it's an idol for them two, only them two can know about it, and it does kind of introduce a knock into Doug's edit, considering what happens on this Calaton 2.0 tribe with Pegleg. But as I talk about that, Pegleg and Doug have now gone on to Calaton tribe, and Matthew and Tanuki have gone on to the Nalina tribe. And I do like Jess's content, as with the others coming into camp, she essentially gets to outline what happened in episode 5 and 6, about how she was on the bottom, and then she woke up after tribal council, and then got into this majority of 4, only for then Doug and Pegleg to come into the camp. And now with the swap, everything is up in the air. We have Pegleg and Doug talking about being on the bottom and having to integrate themselves. Doug has content with Shy, talking about the elements and just comparing the camps. And on Nina, we have content from Leilani telling Tanuki about Ren being a worry instantly, which then sets up Tanuki's pre-season confessional about them being Bear Grylls mixed with a London babe. We have more content from Christopher looking for the idol information, and Tanuki spills, surprisingly, everything that Lawrence told her. And it could come back to bite her. I don't think it has, because again, when she was asked by, I believe, Leilani how she found out the information, it's something that could sink her, but considering that Leilani bought the excuse that Lawrence had only told Tanuki the previous day, then it kind of works out. And we have Ashley even saying that now she's confused about whether it's an idol clue or an idol, but she still can't trust Ren. Then on Calaton, we have Doug telling Pegleg about the idol, which does not go down well with Pegleg. It's a clear knock for Doug for bringing that up. We have Pegleg saying he feels disappointed, betrayed. Pegleg now knows about Doug's idol, something that he wanted to keep secret, and he could have had all to himself if he didn't tell Pegleg, although I do understand Doug trying to tell him the information to solidify their bond and let them know that they're two, but it kind of has this opposite effect of what he was looking for, and it could cause division between them two. On Elena, we then have Ashley saying that she can't work with the girls plus Ren because they're a worry, and just again, more content talking about essentially Ren's downfall. But in the challenge, we have this very physical challenge that we've seen in a lot of the promos. I was actually surprised that this was so late into the season, considering that it's been in so many different previews and such. But we have the one, essentially the Brandon Hans Rupert Boneham challenge, where you have to have weights on a rod against your back, and it's a very difficult challenge. They also don't include it in the episode. I'm assuming they kept with Survivor rules where they can only have a maximum of 2 men in the challenge, because Jess is competing as the only woman from the Calaton tribe and Tanuki is competing. I'm also surprised they didn't pick Lee to go into this challenge. They instead picked Matthew and Christopher, where Christopher I can understand, he's tall, he's someone that has been a physical asset in the challenges, but Lee's got good core strength. He's someone that obviously is a professional boxer. You would think he'd have a lot of upper body strength, he'd be used to carrying weights, so it is interesting that he's instead putting the bags onto people. But I also do like seeing them using the strategy of putting a bit of weight on someone and then letting it break them, rather than what we saw in kind of older Survivor seasons, which was essentially load up on one person and then let them drop. A decent bit of strategy for this challenge. We have Jess surprisingly being counted out by Joel, and he gets medical in. An extremely valiant effort by Jess. Gets a super sympathetic edit as she's there on the ground crying, having to be taken away by medical and given water. You could kind of just tell that she was almost passing out. I believe she said she was faint and stuff, and I'm almost certain that essentially medical told Joel that she had to get out of that challenge because she was not looking good. Joel even says to her, Jess, you have to drop it. There was no choice in that matter. So there was clearly something going on behind the scenes that made medical worry. And we also do have the introduction with the heat meter, which sometimes was a bit redundant in week 1 and week 2. But here I think it really exemplifies just how dangerous the elements can be, where again it's a joke, it's a bit of a meme here in Britain, where we're so used to cold temperatures, about how it rains so much even during the summer. Like August here in Northern Ireland, at least, I'm sure it was the same over there across the borders in Britain. it was raining, like you could not tell it apart from the likes of February or March, and then for some reason September was super warm. But basically like 24, 25 degrees here, and you hear about these news stories of people that cannot cope with the temperatures. And considering it's 36, 37 degrees, again, mid to high 30s, and this is Celsius, you can clearly tell there's people that just aren't built for this temperature and aren't used to it. It's a little bit more different than people from America, which has harder temperatures, going to Fiji. This time here, you can clearly tell that the heat is getting advantage of some people. And again, we have Jess is taken away. Christopher has to be looked at by medical as well after he says that he can't breathe. So it is a bit alarming, but eventually Lelina do end up losing the challenge. Calaton, thanks to Doug and Nathan's hard effort, are able to win immunity. And I do also like that they let Jess get the immunity idol. That's a super touching moment. But Lelina go back to camp, and it's essentially Ashley that's spearheading this Ren move, trying to get the numbers onto her. And then we get this really weird confessional about how suddenly Ren and Hannah are number ones, which again is kind of my gripe with Survivor UK editing, about how they just leave these things out that would have been really important, even 20 or 30 seconds dedicated in a previous episode just to get the setup, where this is now the second time off the top of my head that I can recall a really important alliance, friendship, bond, whatever you want to call it, that's just left out of the edit, where again we had Rachel and Ashley in episode 3, and now we have Ren and Hannah in episode 6 that are apparently super tight and are going to vote together, but that hadn't been set up in the edit. And then we do have some pretty good strategic content from Hannah, correctly assessing that Ashley won't be someone that she can trust. She's always been doubting her, and even Ren is on board to be able to flip the vote onto Ashley. I was actually surprised with how the original Calalot members, Leilani, Tanuki and Matthew, didn't have their names thrown out there whatsoever. We have Matthew saying about how he wants to vote with the majority to solidify himself. We get also a lot of content from Leilani being in the swing position, identifying with her thought processes. And then we get to Tribal Council, where it was kind of weird. It felt kind of reminiscent to episode 3, where it was like, is that all the content we're getting? Where even Lee isn't being set up as a swing. Christopher isn't being set up as a swing, although that's more understandable because, again, the edit actually set up his relationship with Ashley. But it was weird that Lee wasn't a swing. And then we get to Tribal Council, where we're in a 5-2-1 vote. Ren is eliminated for the game. Ren and Hannah follow through and vote for Ashley. And then Lee, for some reason, he votes for Leilani. Don't know why. It wasn't set up in the edit whatsoever. We didn't get any content about why Lee was voting for Leilani coming into this episode. We don't even get his confessional in the confessional booth talking about for Leilani. So spoilers for whenever I do my power rankings, but Lee's not going to be super high on that because, again, this is technically the third time now that he hasn't voted the correct person out. But yeah, we have Ren being the boot, and I do feel really bad for Ren being this super fan, someone that you could tell was super excited that Survivor UK was back, finally was able to play the game. I don't think it was the version of Survivor they were expecting. I think they were thinking more Survivor US rather than clearly Australian Survivor, which this was based off. But again, with one or two adjustments, I could see Ren being a fantastic Survivor player, as there was opportunities for them to get far, just there was really extraneous variables that caused them to get the target on their back, which could have been avoided if a swap didn't happen this episode. But thank you all for watching this video. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything, what your thoughts are about Survivor UK, as I feel like these episodes are stronger than the previous episodes. I think this is the strongest week so far. Again, we have 2 actual eliminations, which is good. The editing felt better than last time, still obviously could have improvements. And I feel like I know the characters a lot better now. These 13 characters seem like people that I can tell you at least about 3 to 5 things about. So that's pretty good. But if you do want to check out more content on the channel, I do have me playing Castaway Island, which is basically a Survivor game you can play on Steam. I believe it's also coming out on Switch. So if you want to check out that game, then please do. It is quite the experience. But thanks for watching. Peace!